Hello and welcome to an essay plan that is going to compare the charge of the Light Brigade with bayonet charge. This video will show you how to compare the two poems effectively. There's lots of videos that will do a really good job of analysing each poem in isolation, which is important, but that is only step one. Step two is to compare the two poems, which means to write about their similarities and their differences. That is what the examiner wants. Okay, so you're in the exam, you've opened up the exam paper, and this is the question that you have to write an essay on. How is the power of warfare, or conflict, presented in Charge of the Light Brigade and one other poem? Well, everybody, here are 4 sentence starters with some evidence that I would use to back each of these up. Sentence starter number 1. Patriotism inspires a sense of glory in the Charge of the Light Brigade, hereafter referred to as charge. But it's a burden to dispose of in bayonet charge. What's my evidence for this? Well, in Charge of the Light Brigade, we have imperative commands such as forward the Light Brigade and honour the charge they made, asking us to be inspired by the glory of the fact that theirs is not to reason why, but theirs is but to do or die. That sounds like something glorious and fantastic and worth celebrating in charge. But in bayonet, patriotism is described as something that is sweating like molten iron out of him. The use of the simile like molten iron, which we may know is literally, I suppose, melted iron, hot, sludgy stuff that just comes out of a machine where it's been melted down, is clearly something that is heavy, uncomfortable, and because it's combined with the image of him sweating as he runs, all implies that patriotism is some sort of burden that he's trying to sweat out of him, but it's a heavy, uncomfortable one. Sentence starter number 2. Between both poems, or in both poems, there is a contrast, a difference of power and drama. In Charge, contrasted with the powerlessness and the weakness that is implied in bayonet charge. What's my evidence for this, everybody? Well, in Charge of the Light Brigade, we have dynamic verbs, such as how they thundered, implying a force that is as dynamic and as dramatic as nature at its most fearsome. We hear how their sabres flashed, implying a quick, sudden, exciting, rapid dynamic movement. We hear how they were sabering the gunners. They got and broken through the lines and they were able to cut them down. The verbs sabering and sundered sound quite dynamic, sound quite dramatic, sound quite exciting. These verbs and adjective, I think they are, flashed, is in huge contrast to the language that we see in bayonet charge, which is more to do with being powerless or being weak. We hear how the soldier was stumbling across the grass. Clearly, everybody, you would analyse this. The use of the verb stumbling implies a very hesitant, unfamiliar ability to move forward. He is dazzled by the rifle fire. The use of the verb dazzled implies a distracting inability to properly focus on what's going on. Yes, he has lugged his rifle, and we hear that this rifle is as numb as a smashed arm. And this is where it gets quite complex. He does not have a smashed arm, but the simile is used to describe the rifle. But clearly conjoining the verb lugged with the idea of a smashed arm, again, adds to a sense of weakness and powerlessness, that we don't necessarily see in Charge of the Light Brigade. Topic sentence number 3, point number 3, paragraph number 3, talking about the power of nature and thinking about how can I compare them both effectively. Well, hopefully this is a good one. The natural world is used in different metaphorical ways to consider different responses to war. So in Charge of the Light Brigade, we hear of a mouth of hell, so that's a bit tenuous. A mouth of a human being is, as far as I'm concerned, to do with the natural world. It is to do with a natural organism that eats things. It's a bit of a reach, but I think what's better is perhaps the idea of a valley of death, and the idea that horse and hero fell. There's a lot of things that you can do with all of these, everybody. The mouth of hell and the valley of death, they clearly have biblical significance. The valley of death comes from Psalm 23. The idea of a mouth of hell, implying, of course, a hellish state. These are grand biblical metaphorical images implying the scale and the enormous status that we should attribute to this war. But I think you can also say something quite clever about horse and hero. Humans and animals are conjoined here via breathless alliteration. That alliteration of the H, the horse and hero. Sounds quite breathless. Sounds like people are running out of breath. They're pounding all over this battlefield. It's quite exhausting for them. But horse and hero are joined together. Horse is not subordinate to hero. Human being is not better than horse in this poem. They're all fantastic according to Tennyson, and we should be commemorating them all equally for the sacrifice they made. And how does he do that? By joining them together with some alliteration. This, I think, is slightly different to the idea of the yellow hare that we hear about in stanza 3 of Bayonet Charge, that rolled like a flame and crawled in a threshing circle, its mouth wide open silent. This yellow hare, and I'm sorry to say that yellow has connotations of dying, we would talk of yellow leaves. Yellow, I'm sorry to say, has connotations of cowardice. Certainly not the same as green, absolutely go, or red, absolutely stop. It's that sort of liminal middle status between the two. This hare that jumps up could be a metaphor for the soldier. It could be a metaphor for all young soldiers who suddenly find themselves thrust into a place of warfare without any proper training or acclimatization. In any case, this metaphor, it appears stunned by the warfare around it. And the green hedge that we hear the soldier is running towards surely implies a sort of beautiful, positive reference to nature that's now been corrupted, because of course it is within this green hedge that the dazzling rifle fire is coming from. So we have an idea of the natural world that was meant to be all beautiful and lovely and untouched by human beings is now one that's being very much corrupted by it. What's not on the slide, but is also worth including here, is the idea that the hare runs into a threshing circle. What is a threshing circle? It's the path that an enormous combine harvester will leave behind it when it goes over a field. So again, if this poor little hare is in fact a metaphor for soldiers, this hare has rather accidentally run into a field which would ultimately lead to its death. A bunny hare can, I am sure, I'm sorry to say, get caught up within a combine harvester. So too does this soldier find themselves in an enormous mechanized scenario that could lead to their quick and sudden death. Goodness me, that's a bit of an upsetting, unpleasant one, but hopefully that's a good comparison between how nature is used in both poems. And we finish off everybody with one final paragraph on religion. Man relies on religion to make sense of war in charge, whilst a mechanized, godless world has no sympathy in Bayonet Charge. So the fact that Charge of the Light Brigade has 6 sestets, a sestet is a 6-line stanza, and the fact that there are 6 of them surely implies that the 600 are being memorialized appropriately. We also hear about the fact that they die in the Valley of Death. The Valley of Death, as said, comes from Psalm 23, and it's meant to be where one gains the companionship and guidance of God, which is obviously something that the soldiers would really want when they are fighting in the Battle of Balaclava in the Crimean War as part of the Charge of the Light Brigade. So religion here is being used to make sense of them. Sorry, it is used to make sense of the trauma. It is used as a helpful coping mechanism. However, we hear in Bayonet Charge the idea of the cold clockwork of the stars. This, I think, is a very clever, if certainly complex metaphor for a godless world. The cold clockwork of the stars. The idea that life just ticks on without any kind of divine intervention, without any kind of moral guidance, without any kind of there being an afterlife that one can at least gain comfort from. There's nothing spiritual in this description of life. It is a cold clockwork. It is an unemotional ticking of a clock that therefore, by implication, will just carry on until it runs out, without any kind of comfort or help. And the harsh consonance there, I think, only emphasises that further. Hughes does not necessarily or explicitly say that there is no God in this world, but I think that we are entitled to presume that is what he is saying with that curious metaphor about life.